Tulips can be such a beautiful part of your spring garden, but it can be disappointing if you planted them and they're not blooming. So today we're going to take a look at some reasons why that could be happening and how you can fix it for the future. And if you've never been here before, my name is Marlene. Welcome everyone to my home and garden channel. Now let's take a look at these wonderful plants called tulips. So let's start off with a little background information. Tulips are spring blooming flowers that you plant in the fall as bulbs, and they give you wonderful blooms at springtime. You can plant them in flower beds like I did right here, or you have the option to plant them in containers like my sister did right here. And they're typically in growing zones 3 through 8. The first thing to bear in mind, though, why you may not be getting blooms from your tulips is that they need to be an area that has lots of sunlight, which means full sun. Full sun meaning 6 or more hours of direct sunlight per day. You can get away with it if you're, say, between 4 to a little bit less than 6, which should basically be a part sunny area or part shade as they would call it, and you can still get blooms there. But if they're anything less than 4 hours, you most likely will not get blooms or barely any. These right here are some that I had on my front porch, which I'd say my front porch is part sun. But if you take a close look in, you'll notice that they're growing towards the front, towards the sunlight. And so they're basically stretching over for it, which is not really good for your plant. So what I did was I went in and I turned it around to kind of force them to grow in the opposite direction. And they did bloom for me. They gave me wonderful blooms, as you can see right here, guys. But again, if you look closer in, you will see that they are reaching for the light. And you really want your plant to be upright and to look really nice, and like they're really enjoying the space that they're in. So I was happy that they did bloom, but that's a lesson learned for me that I will not put them there again. They have to be out in the garden where they can get all the sunlight that they need. And I did plant some pansies right here. They went through a hard freeze, and then these are the little ones that regenerated themselves right there. And just above the pansies, you'll see a little ill-formed shaped one right there. And that could have been because initially it was on the other side and the plant didn't get as much sun. So that, it affects them in different ways like that. So again, just bear in mind to put them when you're planting them in the fall, that you put them in an area that is going to get a lot of sun. And if they're in a container, you can always move them to another spot. The second thing is planting depth. And they need to be planted at the correct depth, these bulbs, when you have them. Typically, you want to put them, say, between 2 to 2.5 times the length of the bulb from top to bottom. So let's say your bulb is about 2 inches. You'd want to put it anywhere from 4 to 5 or even 6 inches, in depth below the soil. And once you do that, you're going to get wonderful blooms coming up. If you plant them too shallow, then you may find that, they don't make it as well because they can be affected by the weather and just different things going on. And if they're too deep, it may just be too much of a deep, stretch for them to come up. And so they don't make it. So you'll definitely want to bear that in mind when you're planting them. So look at the height from the top to the bottom. And I've done videos on that too as well. That goes into a lot of details, step by step, on how to do this. And I'll put one in the description box for you. So when you're ready to plant, you'll have them. Moving on to the next one, that's number 3, and that would be overwatering. So typically when you plant your bulbs, of course, you want to give them a good soak because you're planting them in soil that's dry or almost completely dry. So you give them a good soak, and that'll be sufficient for them if you're putting them in an area where they get rain. If they're not getting rain, then what you can do is basically, water them I'd say maybe once or twice per month, and that usually is sufficient for them. It'll hold up really well because the weather is colder. And because it's colder, you're not going to have a lot of evaporation from the soil. So that will typically be fine for them, because if you don't do that, then what happens is the bulbs rot. And of course, if the bulbs rot, they're not going to come up at all. Or if they do, the plant is not going to be healthy. So you're not going to get beautiful bulbs, which is what you really want to have once spring comes around. And aren't these gorgeous, guys? This was a beautiful red that I chose that particular year. And even while they are blooming, you can check the soil, just to see if it's dried out after they've come up and they're started blooming. If they're start to flop it over a little bit, or the soil is very dry, you'll want to go in and give them a nice soak. and get them going. Because sometimes some springs can be dry. Most cases they are not, but every now and then, the weather is a little unusual, so that can happen. So if they're completely dried out, you'll want to give them a nice soak and then just leave them be and they will be fine. Moving on to number 4, and that would be, it's possible that maybe rodents ate your bulbs. Squirrels and chipmunk and a few others, they love them. It's a delicious treat for them. So when you plant them in the fall, like I did in this video here, they're there watching, guys, and they can see when you put them in, and they'll actually time you because I remember one year I planted them and I thought, yes, I did it. And 2 weeks after I came home one day and there were little holes in the ground, they pulled them right out. So this is a fix for them right here, guys. We went ahead and we got some construction mesh. We put it over the soil after we planted them and then covered it with a mulch and left it right there. But be sure to remember to pull them up, to pull up the wiring, whatever you use, or mesh, or you can even put it, have it dome over them above the ground if you like, whatever works best for you. But be sure to remember that you take it up, as soon as the early spring comes, because you don't want to have the plants not being able to grow up because they're being blocked by something else. So you'll definitely want to bear that in mind. And these are the ones that came up for us this spring, and I absolutely love them. We did want to plant a little bit more in clusters, but we didn't get to put the pansies by them, so we just did what we could do with what we had. Now moving on to the next one, and that would be maybe you put them in a place that is too warm. So if the place is tropical, where you're going to have a lot of palm trees and all of that, then ideally you're not going to have tulips doing very well there because they need that cold period. Typically, I'd say between 8 to 12 weeks of temperatures that are really cold for them, which I'll tell you details of what that is in a second. But it's for a process that's called vernalization, where they do need to have certain hormones get that exposure for them to bloom when the springtime comes around. And that's typically between 1 to 7 degrees Celsius and 34 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit. And typically you'll see the little heads coming up very shortly after. You can see the blooms showing themselves that they're about to give you some good coloration. And I just wanted to take a moment to invite you to subscribe to my channel. If you've never done so before, be sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the notification bell twice so you never miss an upload. We can journey along as I go through my garden topics, tips, and tours, and it also helps my channel to grow. The next one, and that's number 6, which was that your soil may be too heavy. This right here is a section in our backyard where it's basically clay, as you can see, very clay, very heavy. Right here, my husband is clearing off some of the things that were growing on top there. But soil like this is really not good for your tulips at all. You want to have soil that looks like this right here. And because this is in a container, you can just basically put like your potting soil in there. You can add some compost to it. But let's say if it's in the ground, you'll want to clear some of that soil out. It's really not like after it rains, because when it rains, your soil is really heavy. Not the best time to plant anything, really. And just clear some out, and you can mix in garden soil, compost, and other things that'll help to lighten the soil, because that's what they need. Because it's similar to overwatering your tulip bulbs. If the soil is heavy and it holds a lot of water in and they can't breathe properly, they're gonna rot, and then there goes all of your efforts. Moving on to number 7, and that would be that you did not deadhead them previously. You can see right here, we just love them when they bloom for us. And of course, as they get older, the colors get a little bit lighter. You may notice that they even open up a little bit more, especially if the day is warmer. But after we've enjoyed these wonderful blooms, you'll see that there are flower stalks that are left behind. And that's where the seed heads are going to form. And that actually pulls energy away from the plant in terms of developing, more wonderful bulbs. So you want to go in very quickly and take care of that. Daffodils don't really need that. They're perfectly fine not being deadheaded. But tulips will need it, because those seed heads, guys, believe me, they come up very quickly. In no time, you're kind of looking and wondering how they got there so quickly. So get some nice, sharp, clean pruners and just go in and take them off as far down as you can go. But you will need to leave the leaves behind. They do need that to stay. And I highly recommend getting a nice, sharp, clean pair of pruners. If yours are looking a little rusty or jagged, it may be time to get a new one. And I will link a similar type to this in my description box, where you can get it online. Of course, ideally, if you can have the leaves get to this point here where they can be, as dry as these are, that would be perfect. But if you don't like seeing that too much, at least allow them to get yellow or even light green, so you know that they have had a chance to store some food from photosynthesis, so the bulbs can be nice and large for the following year. The next part is aging or life expectancy. Tulips are not very good repeaters. So typically like the first 2 years, you'll see how they're so wonderful. The first year for me is typically the best. They're largest. These ones to the left right here, those are actually 3 years old, and this is the set that it came from before. So all of these that you're seeing right here, this was 3 years ago at my mailbox, and they were so gorgeous. But then as time goes by, like the second year, they get to be a little bit smaller, but still looking pretty good. But then, you know, over time, it doesn't happen anymore. And you may get very, very tiny blooms or maybe none at all. And it's just the nature of it. The thing about most bulb plants, especially like tulips, they love phosphorus. So you can, when you're planting them, depending on the soil in your area, you can always put a little bit of fertilizer that has phosphorus in it, a high amount of it. And that's going to help them. You can even top dress them, mix a little bit in your soil, you know, after they bloom in the spring or even when you plant them, and that'll help them along. So if you want, you can always get fertilizers like these, and I'll put a link in my description box where you can get some of these online. So you can try that if you want to, but it can only take them so far, guys. Like say 4 years in, regardless of whatever you do, you're probably not gonna get the bulbs that you would like to have. So I'm just, you know, being honest with you about it. The next one is that the bulbs are too small. So you'll see that they start to divide off, yes. And you get some little smaller ones like these right here, but they don't have enough vitality and enough energy in them in order for them to give you the blooms that you want. So if you're taking them up to put them in another area like I was with those just now, you can basically take off the smaller ones and just plant back the larger ones, or just leave them in the soil if you would prefer that. And to see some good companion plants for your tulips, I'll link this video at the end. It's a recent video that I did talking about the wonderful spring blooming flowers that are out there and when to prune them and when not to prune them for best results. So be sure to check that out once you're finished here. And just to say that when your tulips have come out, initially they may seem a little short, especially if they're in the ground as compared to being in a container, because these are the same ones planted at the same time, same depth and everything. But you'll notice that happens a little bit where they are not as tall. But just give them some time, because usually the flowers last, I'd say, between 3 to 4 weeks. And then you'll see they start to stretch up as they get a little bit larger. But just to say, guys, if for whatever reason, any of those that I just gave, that your tulips did not bloom this year and you still want tulips, you can go into your garden center. They have them in there. Most of them, they have them. As long as you're not like in the month of May, late May, they won't have them anymore. But you can go ahead and get some and just beautify your garden. And, you know, after you've done that and you've enjoyed them this year, you can go ahead and in the fall, you can plant some so that the next year you can have some that you grew from the bulbs. It really is best to be, you know, have gardening be a no stress zone for you. Just try to just relax and enjoy the journey is what I say, because that's what gardening really is about. It's so good for you. It's a very good hobby, very rewarding. It provides you food if you're growing food, which I do quite a bit of that as well too. I have more flowers though, I will say, but it cheers you up. It's good for people that pass by your home, people who visit. They love to see them. Sometimes they'll tell you, sometimes they won't, but it is giving them a lift. Especially in times like these, you know, we really need things like that. So if there's anything I missed, my more seasoned gardeners or even my newer ones, you know, we all learn as we go. Leave me a comment, let me know, and I'll be happy to take a look at it for the next video. So I want to thank you all so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful spring gardening season, or at least starting to plan for it. And I'm always happy when you come along and return for my other videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I do hope to see you in the next video. Take care.